So, as we're going through the last chapter of Ketubot, we're dealing with the rulings of these judges, Hanan and Admon. And Admon has some judgments related specifically to marriage, to the Ketubah, but quite a lot of his judgments are related to property dealing and particularly to documentation of property dealing. So we get a sense, by the way, as to what his core, or let's say what his core practice was. And he's described in the introduction to the chapter as, they're both described as actually Dayane Gazay Lot, which is a theft in the Kaufman manuscript, but Gazay Rot, which are decrees in most other manuscripts. So, and we see he seems to be very interested in the documentation of land transactions. So maybe the text Gezerot is more accurate. Gezerot, meaning decrees, is more accurate than the text Gezelot, meaning robberies, which appears in our manuscript. At any rate, Admon seems very, very interested in documentation of property, and we'll see a couple more examples now. Yesterday, we looked at someone who contested ownership of a field, but was also signed as a witness on the bill of sale. So a clear conflict there. Let's just carry on now. Mi shehalach lo limedinas hayam ve'avda derech sadehu. Someone went to a country beyond the sea, so he went abroad, but rather than abandoning his wife, avda derech sadehu, the path to his field was lost. So he's got a path that crosses clearly over neighboring fields. So he seems to have right of access. But he's lost the right of access. We don't understand why, whether the path itself was lost, or perhaps the field in question changed ownership. And the Gemara brings up these kinds of questions. Maybe, the possibility that the fields in question change ownership is very interesting and raises all kinds of other doubts. Anyway, Admon says, Admon Omer, Yelech lo bi tzara. Admon says, look, just let him walk over by the shortest way. In other words, he has the right to walk over his neighbor's property, providing he takes the shortest way on the way to his own property. For Chachamim Omrim, Yiknei lo derech b'mea maneh, or yifrach ba'avir. The sages essentially say there's no way out of this. They give two possibilities. Yiknei lo derech b'mea maneh. Let him purchase a path for 100 maneh. Well, remember we said 1 maneh is 100 zuz. It's the value of the ketubah for a widow. 100 zuz. The sages are saying, even if it costs him 100 money, that's 10,000 zuz. He has to pay that price. It's just way over the land, the value of the land in any possible definition. Or that's the sage's first option. What's their second option? Or yifrach ba'avir. Let him basically sprout wings and fly through the air. In other words, the sages are saying, Admon is saying, look, he can take a practical way out. But the sages are saying, no, you don't have any option but to buy out whoever now owns this land around your field in order to establish rights of access. You've got no right of access just from custom and practice. And then Admon is now going to go on to another property transaction. This one related to documentation and much closer to the one we looked at yesterday. Hamotzi shtar chov al chavero ve'hala hotzi shemachar lo et hasadeh. Someone produced a debt document, hamotzi shtar chov al chavero, someone who essentially serves a debt document, serves notice of a debt on his neighbor. And the latter produced one that showed he'd sold him the field. So we got two possible transactions here, two separate transactions. Admon Omer, Admon says, Ilu hayiti chayav lecha, Ilu hayiti chayav lach, hayalach lehipared shelach b'kushemachalta li et hasadeh. Admon rules, look, if I'd owed you money, you should have reclaimed your debt when you sold me the field. So in other words, you had a property dealing with me, and you sold me a field and you collected money. Well, why at that point didn't you come along and ask for the money to repay the debt at the same time? Admon is saying, look, this doesn't make sense. I.e., he cannot collect on he cannot collect on this debt. But the sages are going to take issue. This I've translated here as far-sighted, but it might be prudent. Pokeach is to be open-eyed, literally. This was kind of open-eyed, prudent. This was far-sighted. He might have sold him the land in order to be able to take it from him as a pledge. In other words, the seller of the land, who's also the lender of the money, maybe he lent the money unsecured. He couldn't get his debt back. So the situation is A lends B money. He doesn't think he's going to reclaim his debt from B. But he sells him the land with the idea that now that B holds a physical asset, he can take a legal charge over that asset, and then he can realize his debt. Whether the halacha goes according to Admon is kind of complicated, and the Gemara sort of goes down on different ways depending on the exact circumstances of the transaction and the customs and practices and the timing of the two transactions. So we're in deep water there, and I don't think I can get in there tonight. But it's very interesting that Admon clearly is into edge cases in documentation of property transactions, and that tells us something about his interests. And we're going to learn the last of Admon's rulings tomorrow.